In 1966 in Detroit, I recorded a song called Happiness is Here. It was a great song, but it really didn't do too much. Now, 30 years later, I discovered that I was popular and successful on the Northern Soul scene, and that's wonderful in itself. But then something really strange happened out of the blue. I made some demos in 1968 with some guys in Connecticut while I was on tour with King Curtis. I thought I was doing a demo, and I never knew it had been released until I got a phone call from England, and I heard on the phone, "I'm just a pebble on the beach and I sit and wonder why." And I found out that they had the nerve to change my name to Toby Legend.
Over 30 years ago, I worked for Barry Gordy as a writer and as a producer at Motown Records. I had just completed my own single when standing backstage at the Fox Theater, he casually mentioned to me, "Do you really want to be an artist, or would you prefer to be a writer and a producer?" I thought about it for a moment, and then I replied, "To be a writer and a producer." And so he proceeded to destroy all of the records. And then I found out there are two that remained. And would you believe that somebody from Scotland paid £15,000 to own it? Here I am on bended knees, I'm laying my heart down at your feet. Now, do I love you?
That I'm feeling way down deep. I think about you day and night.
Northern Soul, a youth culture phenomenon since 1967. During this film, you'll see the feet, the faces, the movers and shakers, and the artists who recorded the songs. Hang on, because this is Northern Soul.
To me.
I was there at the dawn of the Northern Soul scene. It was very much a particular way of life. The music, the clothes, the scooters, all the venues. And drugs, of course, played a part in that as well. The clothes were specifically based around some Ben Sherman shirts, Levi jeans, Lee Riders, brogues, suits, which were very much a part of it all, particularly when we went dancing in the evenings. We were soul rebels, and Saturday nights we'd travel to the Manchester Wheel by train from Blackpool. Going to the Wheel every Saturday was a pilgrimage. That was the place we needed to be, that's where the action was, that's where the music started. One of the important things to remember about this underground cult was that here were we, just white boys, very heavily involved in black music. We were pretenders to some extent, but we thought nothing of it. This was the music that we loved. We wanted to pretend that we were black. We danced as though we were black. We even sung as though we were black.
The music was special, the clothes were special, the people were ideal. And everyone's idea on a Saturday night was to gather from different parts of England to, if you want to look at it, look, it was their shrine. It was an absolute magical evening for all the sounds. Everyone was happy, specialised drugs, specialised music, special people. It wasn't a cult, it was a secret sort of society, if you want to call it. It was the beginning of designer mods, the modern generation that wanted to be involved with it. The music was extra special, and still is to those that was actually there at the time. The fashion was the start of what you call, the leading up to now, what we call designer clothes. Ben Sherman's and Moa suits, you identified yourself. Every other Tom, Dick and Harry were rockers in leather, and you knew they weren't into it. They'd be into anything else but Northern Soul.
When I'm feeling
So what is Northern Soul? I mean, not all the records played are in fact by soul artists. Key components are explained by a variety of industry professionals and enthusiasts.
There's one thing that I always used to say, and that was, my life is my soul and my soul is my life. And it was just as if like you lived for the weekends. You know, there was nothing else that was important at that time. I remember writing a letter to my dad when I was about 20 saying, if this was it, if I was going to die soon, then I'd had a good life, you know. And he keeps this letter to this day.
I didn't get excited about Northern Soul to be able to walk into a record shop in the high street in any British town and buy that record. I got excited by the fact that it was forbidden, it was underground, it was secret, it wasn't readily available, you had to travel huge distances, you had to stay up all night, you had to stand in petrified fear watching these older guys trading, and you were a young person in the out, you know, it was a rites of passage thing, you wanted to be part of that kind of atmosphere.
Here was a club in Blackpool that people from all over the country came to, and you were part. The country might have had 52 million people, but you were 600 people who were there, and that was it.
You were part of this almost secret society, and there was, you could actually, a working class person could be an elitist, which is something they couldn't achieve, or they could hardly achieve in any other way. But you had something, you know, there is something interesting, important about me.
Northern Soul for me means a collection of people who are united with the love of the music, the train spotters who would run 500 miles to collect a record with a big red A on it, or the people who just want to look fabulous and dance all night. It's a passion.
I'd never seen a club DJ like doing what they did before, where they talk in between the records and things. I suppose, I don't know, having kind of grown up going out to techno clubs and stuff, and it was all seamlessly mixed, and then you just hear that the guy's got some stash there, and they'll just go, I've been looking for this record for 30 years. I got it this week.
The one thing Northern Soul was to me was always angst in the lyric and the melody, always. And I never saw a song that became a classic on the Northern Soul that didn't have angst. They had to. There was, you know, there were some Northern records I didn't get, and I think that's true of every musical genre. There are certain areas, no matter what you're into, you didn't get. But the ones I got that I understood and that were my biggest records had the best lyric, the most amazing soulful voice where the guy was tearing his heart out singing it.
I talk about it to people now, they haven't got a clue what I'm talking about. It's alien to them. It's an amazing story, this underground culture, this subcult, 30 years and more. Kids of 19 are into it. People of 50 are into it. People, you know, Northern Soul now is reaching other countries. It's unique, it's amazing. Rock and roll is dead and gone, but Northern Soul still goes on for 30 years.
I'm an American who got into Northern Soul via the mod scene in the early 80s in New York. And I first got into Motown, and then from there, a friend of mine sent me a tape with stuff that sounded like that, but it wasn't Motown. And those peculiar artists, those odd songs that I'd never heard of before were it. And I started looking for those records, and that is what I got into.
There was a point in my life, a long time ago when I first left home, I can distinctly remember I lived in a damp, horrible bedsit, not too far from here. And one night, I was probably at the lowest of the low. I actually sat in bed, because it was the only place I could keep warm, eating a cold tin of beans, because I had no matches, no money, because all the money that week, all my wages had gone on records. I'd been to Wigan at the weekend and spent all my money.
The scene itself stems mainly from black American music. We've all heard of Stax and Tell Motown, but there are a lot of other labels out there producing great music, sometimes a lot better than Stax and Motown do it themselves. The scene also stemmed partly because of the people, the code, the dress, the language. It was a language and a scene all wrapped up in itself.
So a lot of people these days think that I'm crazy to travel all over the country to listen to these particular records. They say, well, what are you going for? Are you there picking up women? Are you there drinking all night long? They don't understand it's actually about the music. That's the sole reason for going. And unless they actually attend and sort of get into that themselves, I can't really explain to them what it is about this sort of music, which is makes me so passionate about it.
A Northern Soul weekend was typically turmoil from start to finish. The thing about getting to the club, the thing about planning your week. It started on a Monday. You were phoning around trying to get lifts, get some gear, get to the club. You'd eventually mess around in Manchester all afternoon, end up on a bus to the Torch or whatever. The whole week was taken up with arranging one day out of the Saturday. And that's what you live for, the whole week.
The irony, or one of the ironies for me about the Northern Soul scene, was that it was a tribute to the black performers, adored and enjoyed by a predominantly white audience, a white, young, working class audience, who actually owed no great allegiance to the heritage of the performers that they were enjoying.
There weren't many black people going out on what has become known as the Northern scene, because their parents, being of West Indian background, the music that influenced them was very different. They liked things like Harry Belafonte, etc., more sort of that easy listening side of black music, as well as ska. There were some crossover R&B things that influenced them, but not much of that Motown 4/4 beat, which became synonymous with Northern Soul.
It developed through '67, which was probably its highlight in terms of creatively. But it really took its point, its actual inspiration from the '66 sound of Motown.
The most vivid memory I've got of all of those clubs, almost, I mean, because they were all mirror images of each other. The most vivid memory I've got is of when they turned the buildings out at like 5 or 6 in the morning in the middle of November, in the bleak, cold, windy, raining, snowy, and all kinds of stuff like that. All these people, it was like something out of the Night of the Living Dead. The doors would open, all these people would pour out, and they'd all go off in different directions. There'd be no buses, no trains, and I used to think, why would anyone do this?
Northern Soul was a phenomenon of the 70s. The music, however, was an extension of what was happening in the 60s. Very mono-sounding, stomping music, full of strings, horns, wailing vocals. Great songs. I mean, the songs had to be great because the production wasn't as good in the 60s as it was in the 70s. It followed on really from what was happening in Motown to Motown in Detroit in the 60s. The records were very rarely heard outside of the north of England, hence the term Northern Soul.
Motown records to me are Motown records, they're not Northern Soul. Northern Soul record is something, I always think of Northern Soul records having been made by people who were trying to make Motown records and just didn't quite get it right, you know. Maybe they hadn't the resources. I mean, a lot of the greatest Northern Soul records came out on tiny little labels, you know, made by people who didn't have a pot to piss in.
You asked me about the most memorable DJ night ever. It was not one of those opening nights at Wigan that I did, it was Major Lance Live at the Torch. Because having played at Blackpool, DJing at a night like that meant, I can't explain it, it sticks in my memory to this day, this sheer privilege of playing in what was probably one of the top 2 or 3 nights ever on the Northern Soul scene. It was the first time I really actually accepted the fact that I had probably become one of the top line DJs, as opposed to just a record collector.
As the Torch evolved and live acts were also considered as an option to attract even more attention to the club and also to the way this whole thing was starting to develop. More DJs were added to the roster and legendary DJ names from the northern scenes such as Tony Jebb, who then must have pestered Chris Burton a lot to then eventually achieve the inclusion to the DJ roster of Ian Levine.
We got this divide between Wigan Casino and Blackpool Mecca, and I said, well, hang on a second, you know, I would think that if the Mecca wants to go in that direction, then there's people who want to go to the Mecca. With the Wigan, I would prefer it to stay as the stomping sounds of the original Northern Soul things. And nothing against the records like Ladies' Choice and etc., because they're good records in their own right, but I felt they weren't really very Northern Soulish.
Russ, as far as I was concerned anyway, I'm sure was looking to build a team of DJs that he could mould into the image of the casino. He'd had many top DJs on there in the preceding months. People like Ian Levine from Blackpool Mecca and Colin Curtis had worked there, but he was looking then, I think, to build a team that could identify with the creativity of Wigan Casino.
A lot of my friends who were at the cutting edge of what was going on, and they were Mecca regulars, basically didn't like it and started to hassle Russ Winstanley, saying, you know, where's the sides? You haven't got the right records. So Russ Winstanley very innocently turned around and said, well, can you show me a man who has? So I'm not necessarily a man, but I was certainly a boy, and they pushed me onto stage. I was clutching a box of about 50 or 60 records, and I did have some stuff that was fairly exclusive.
I've always been interested in music, interested in finding my own music. I've not been interested in following what somebody else is doing. I'm not that interested in somebody else's opinion that this is a great record. I listen to it, but that doesn't mean that I'll think it's a great record. And that's why over the past I've probably fallen out with, I fell out with, even with John Anderson, because I didn't play one of the things he gave me to play. In fact, I sold it because that was capping on my shit, because I thought it was awful.
One of the originators of rare Northern Soul records was DJ Rob Bellers.
I was here at the wheel in 1970 when Dave Godin came down from London when he was Blues and Soul Man. At the time, we were discussing music in the pub there next door, the White Hart. Mr. Godin said there's no terminology or no name for this music. And he quoted Northern, and he said that is a handy label, let's call it Northern Soul.
We tend to forget that what we term disco music is in fact the product of an alien culture. It's an import from the United States, and more importantly a product and creation exclusively of Black America. And this is not indigenous to Europe or Britain, and British and European musical roots are actually quite different.
Dave Godin, being what he is, was broad-minded enough to realise that there could be something outside the London record scene. He didn't take much persuading to come up north, and we actually met him. He arrived in a taxi on a very wet night. He got the train to Piccadilly, got a taxi to Whalley Range. We met him in Whalley Range, had a few drinks, chit-chat, took him down to the wheel. It completely changed overnight.
Originally we knew the music as New Wave Rhythm and Blues, and from there I believe Carl Dean named it Rhythm and Soul, and then after that I believe Dave Godin termed it Northern Soul, which is where that stems from.
The seeds of the music go as far back as 1963, when such records as Heatwave and Arthur Reeves, various major Lance tracks including Monkey Time were actually produced and released, because at that time the sound itself started to change, and the introduction of strings into records was moving fast away from the traditional rhythm and blues type, earthy type sound into a more silkier, more earnest type of music.
This was a unique scene. I was involved in its embryo form. It was a little thing. It had its own movements. It had its own characters. They all took Purple Hearts and got stoned out of their minds, but they all loved this marvellous music.
We knew rhythm and soul, as we called it. Major Lance, Curtis Mayfield, the Impressions, and we were collectors, avid collectors of that sort of music. The music we tended to play then was very much rhythm and soul, which gradually moved forward in about 1968 to 69 to records that we were picking up as imports.
It was word of mouth initially, and it very, very soon got round, you know, that we were the place to come to. I mean, I had people that would come from Blackpool and Preston on a train, leave at 5 o'clock on a Saturday morning, get to me at 1:30, buy one record for probably a £5 in those days, say thank you very much, wait for the next list, and get back on the 1:45 train and go back home and get home at 11 o'clock.
I will have to say Rob Bellers at the time was very innovative with the sounds he brought in, because I was quite into British sounds, Teller, Chains of Love, and I had those in my collection. But he was one of the first guys who brought American imports on. He was one of the first guys who had the secret sounds. It sounds very elitist, but he could pick a winner. He could pick a great dance tune.
So we did a deal with a man called Mr. Ivor Abard, who owned the wheel. If we give you the records, can one or both of us play them for the honour of it, blah, blah, blah. And we were selling them at the time, but it's neither here nor there. So that was the deal.
In 1967, I was part of the formation of Soul City Records, which was the first record store in the United Kingdom that specialized in only black music. It was formed with myself, Dave Godin, and we had a third partner, Robert Black. And I don't know that Northern Soul existed so much as a phenomenon at that point. But we certainly did have records that would have later or would have appealed to a Northern Soul audience.
The only imports that I can remember being played at the start was a Bobby Bland LP, which Call On Me used to get played off. There were no import singles. I couldn't say when the year was. I would guess it would be something like 1969. And it was when they brought J.J. Barnes' Real Humdinger appeared. Otis Legal, I can remember. One or two imports, people looked at them and thought they were pressings.
The End of the Wheel was the beginning of the Northern Soul era. Wonderful times. From then on in, we got places like Blackpool Mecca, we got The Torch, we got Wigan Casino. Terrific times, great music, but that was Northern Soul. Before the Wheel, it was probably more R&B based.
The artists who recorded the Northern hits have discovered how popular they really are, and although relatively unknown in their homeland, the UK has warmed towards them, and some have acquired a strong fan base.
30 years ago, there was a record that we made under a group called The Butlers, called If That's What You Wanted. Fair record, and here we are over 30 years ago. This record is what they say in America, the bomb over in England, and I'm just mystified by it. I mean, it's just a phenomenon to make a record 30 years, and 30 years later, the record is a hit. That's just a phenomenon. I'm just totally blown away about it.
Thank you very much for playing the song and listening and loving it. That makes me feel real good to know that, how's the word, my music will live on in your hearts.
The Wigan Casino, I remember the performance there was so tremendous. It was so many people. And when we hit the stage, it was just so much love. Everybody was calling my name. Herbie, Brenda, Herb, Brenda. I was like, this is a part of the world I've never been to before, and they know me. They know my name. And I just had to stand there, you know, and look at them. And then when the music would start, it was high energy, so much high energy over there. And the people were right with you, you know? And they watched everything, they knew every word to your song. They were really in love with you already.
The Northern Soul scene at the time was not a Northern Soul scene. It really wasn't nothing about Northern Soul, it was just about soul music. But then slowly but surely there was a little clique off to the side somewhere who probably went to the Twisted Wheel, who started this little movement, like a club, if you will, like the Knights of the whatever. And they started this movement, small group, far from the mainstream, which is where I was, and they started calling it Northern Soul, and it became like looking for obscure records that the mass public wasn't into, so they could feel special and go, hey, we like something they don't like. We've got our own little thing here. And then you could go around and they could go around and tell people things like, I bet you've heard that, but have you heard this? You go, what is that? This is by Eddie Holman. Eddie Holman, I never heard that. Of course you haven't. It wasn't a hit. It's rare. Would you like to hear it? You know, and that's how they recruited people. It became a movement.
Over there, I can go over there and work all the time now, because they have what they call all-nighters, where the show doesn't start, or it's like a disco kind of thing. And the people go over there, they bring us American artists over there and we perform. And I appreciate Northern Soul because it has really helped me to maintain my status with myself as a performing artist.
I'm surprised that was a big song. It was a song that didn't get much attention at all in the United States. But it was one of those type of songs that we got together on, and I wanted to venture out and start doing some things in an up-tempoed beat. And this was one of the songs that Ragaboy and some of his people put together to give me that kind of attention. But I didn't think it was a great song.
the things that are being liked right now by the people over there are things that I was very close to, and I did them a long time ago, and I never forgot them. And I'm just very surprised and very thrilled that people appreciate that music, because we really put a lot into it at the time.
London, la 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 me. I love you.
La means I love you to all the lovely people in London.
Northern Star.
Delphonics from Philadelphia.
Northern Soul.
Sitting in our home, Northern Soul is what's happening.
You wanna change me, rearrange me. Why don't you just take me as I am?
We were very versatile. We had vibes in the band. We had various bongos, I mean, which no band was using then, and various unique percussion things that would enable us to duplicate the sound of the records when we played them. Motown, of course, was huge, and there were certain characteristics in the music that required certain instruments, and we were very versatile in that we incorporated that in our personal appearances and in our records. So, worked out very well.
When I went to England, the reaction that I got from the audience was fantastic. What was more surprising than anything is the reaction I got from songs that I never knew were that popular over there, and the way they were screaming and hollering and cheering for songs that I just never knew were that big. As a matter of fact, when I was called to come over and they sent me the list of those songs, I called back and told them that they had the wrong songs for the wrong artists, because I didn't remember those songs. There are songs that I never performed in America, and I didn't remember them. And I think it was my mom or somebody else said to me, "Oh yeah, don't you remember Beat the Beatles?" I said, "Oh, okay." So I was really surprised that they were that excited over those tunes.
I've been familiar with the Northern Soul scene for a number of years because there were several people from England that would write me from time to time, and I would send them records. But I didn't realize that it was as extensive as it is, I would imagine, because I mean it's certainly lasted through time, and it's just great that they are loyal to that era. And all of the artists here in Detroit are very, very much grateful for that.
You know what bothers me most about this industry is that sometimes it's like having two lovers. One that's not that faithful and the other one that's always faithful. And I'm not putting my country down, but a lot of times records that don't do anything in America are very big in Europe, in England especially. And it's been happening to me since my first recordings, going back to leaving the Del Vikings and recording on my own. Records that nobody even know in this country are big records in Europe, and it's really incredible. And a lot of my co-workers they're very lucky because today they're still basically, they basically can make a living because of England. And that's most important to all of us, to know that we do have that lover that's faithful to us, and that's England.
Come on inside, baby. Why are you standing out there?
You can take that worried look off your face. I'm not even gonna act the way you think I am. Come on in, out of the rain, my friend. Talk to me till the sun comes in. Through these salty tears that you have made me cry, I can see that she makes you a happy guy. Just so thrill we had is gone. No use in holding.
It just goes back to about 66, 67, somewhere around there. And that was done in Los Angeles at Gold Star. That was my early days, just after the In Crowd, as a matter of fact. And I didn't really do anything here. It got airplay, but it wasn't really well accepted by the audience, you know. It was just kind of laid there, and it sold some copies, but overseas it really did well. In Europe it did great. It was a huge hit record for me over there and in South Africa.
At that time, my first experience, the clubs were really jumping then, and we didn't quite do the northern scene yet, but we were working around London, going up north as far as Manchester, and down Grimsby, and I went everywhere, had a ball. And then we, later, I think we came back, maybe I think about 2 years or so later, and just played the scene again. And then I had a long absence until recently, about a year ago, I played the northern scene. Finally got up there to see what that was all about, and I loved it.
If you ask me, is the one record that I would point to say that it sold the least amount, it was the worst selling, it was the least received in the United States or anywhere at that time. If you ask me, every record I've ever had has sold something, even if it was just a regional hit. If it was just a big hit in Cleveland or a little hit in Cincinnati. This record didn't do shit nowhere. And then, next thing I know, the record is a #1 record in Northern England. And it's done it 3 times now. 3 times this record has been like top 5 record in Northern England.
I'm Bob of Bob and Earl. My name is Bob Relf. And I did a few songs, cut a few records as Bob Relf. The first time I went to England was in 1969. I did quite a few. We had quite a few venues all over England. I did practically all of the venues were soul venues, soul clubs. Yeah, Blow My Mind to Pieces. I'm reacquainting myself with the song also. What I remember is I was associated with a man called by the name of Aki Allion, and we were doing some things in one of Ray Charles's old recording studios in Los Angeles here, and that's where we did Blowing My Mind to Pieces.
Hi, I'm William DeVace.
I'm Eddie Lewis.
And I'm Walter Ward.
And I'm Kenny Sinclair, and the 4 of us are called
The Olympics.
Well, Baby Do the Philly Dog was written by Fred Smith, and there was a big dance out at the time. And when did Fred come to you? After the dance came out, Walter?
Yeah. Matter of fact, we had just closed in Philadelphia, and the dance was catching on really good around Philly. And we were going in the studio the next week, and we came in and said, well, why don't we do the Philly Dog? And we did it, and turned successful.
Hi, my name is Jimmy Conwell, and much to the surprise of a lot of folks there in London, England, I'm also Richard Temple, and I'm going to tell you briefly how that all happened. And I actually, when I recorded the record, That Beaten Rhythm, myself and one of my very dear friends who's passed away a few years back, Leonard Jewell Smith, we were all part of a production company, Leonard Jewell and another guy by the name of Henry Graham. And Henry Graham was the president of this company, and we called it Soulsville.
1967 saw the real emergence of a major all-night event. The Twisted Wheel in Manchester was the first venue to actively play Northern rarities on a weekly basis. One of the pioneers, DJ Les Cackel, explains.
That is the wheel over there, that's the door where we went in. We had Junior Walker on down there, and even Tina Turner over there with her husband Ike.
I probably worked at the Twisted Wheel maybe for longer than anybody else. I guess it would be 3 years or so, right through doing the early sessions until the club closed in 1971. Yeah, so maybe even more than Roger Eagle.
I was craving to go, and I had to wait till I was 17 to actually be old enough to be able to go to Twisted Wheel. So the minute I could, I rushed off down there and met Rob Bellers. Rob was the uncrowned king of Northern Soul. Rob was the person who changed a scene that was a mod soul scene playing R&B and soul into what we know today as Northern Soul. In other words, into a scene that we know where people played rare records, where people found American imports. The scene had been thriving on Mr. Bang Bang Man by Little Hank, on She Blew a Good Thing by the American Poets, the Five Piper by the Dynatones, and all the Motown stuff like Heaven Must Have Sent You by the Elgins. Some very good English things, there's nothing else to say, by the Incredibles. All those stateside Soul Supply records, but very much British soul, British released soul of American records.
I personally, I love the Wheel. I think in 2 years I only missed twice, and I can't remember the reasons, but when they tried to shut it, we all tried to get together and write letters to the council. We wrote to the police, blah blah. Got Dave Goddard involved, he kindly wrote a letter. But we knew it was going to shut. I remember when it shut, Edwin Starr was on, but the January 71. Les Cackel was like the last DJ. I think I gave him records, other people gave him records. Ian Levine was there. We were basically all giving records, but we knew it was going to shut. I remember people crying. It was one of the saddest days.
The Twisted Wheel was one of the major venues to play, and I think I played there at least 7 times in the course of the time that the club was open. And most definitely the last date was the date that I remember most of all, because it was very, very nostalgic. It was very emotional. A lot of people flocked to the venue for that particular night. And even today, I still meet people who remember and were there for that particular last night at the Twisted Wheel.
When I started DJing down there, I used to lend the guy on the early shift, which was the sort of 11 well 3 shift, the popular stuff, and I used to break a lot of the rarer stuff later on from 3 well 8. The only trouble is, as you build them up and get more popular with the dancers, they want them all the time, and you've got to keep discovering the rarer stuff. Even though I had a lot of people after me head for playing too much rare stuff and unknown stuff.
Sometimes when you went in the Wheel, when it was winter time, there was a room just beyond the coffee bar called the cold room, and that was icy cold in there. But elsewhere it was like a furnace, and probably by 2 o'clock when the place was packed, even though you'd come out of a really cold Manchester night, inside was almost like a furnace. And you'd have to get down to a short sleeve Ben Sherman and slacks, and anything more than that was just impossible. A suit jacket would be drenched in perspiration with dancing, condensation. And all the walls were painted with gloss paint, a light coloured gloss paint. There were stone walls, so there was just nowhere for the condensation to go other than collect on the walls and drip back down on you. So you were sweating it out, and within minutes it'd be dripping back onto your filthy, nicotine-ridden sweat, dripping back onto your precious tonic trousers or onto your handmade shoes.
He was living for the weekend. You had such a good time at the Twisted Wheel. You didn't want the Saturday night to end. And when you finally recovered, it was probably about Wednesday. And you was getting ready again to go through the whole bit again. Also at the wheel, there was many American artists who appeared. How they got them down there, I do not know. I saw the vibrations. They were that good. I went and watched them on the early session. We all had to go out 11 o'clock. And then they got in the queue to go in for the late session to watch them again.
The location of top all-nighter venues tended to be just off the M6. To the north we had Wigan Casino, and in the Midlands, the Catacombs.
The first DJ at the Catacombs was himself and Farmer Carl, who is now Carl Dean. Why he was called Farmer Carl, I just don't know. We presume he lived on a farm, but whether he did or not, I just don't know. And he left. He had a falling out with Dobson, the owner. And then Bob Crocker came.
He was one of the most unusual people. He really sort of very striking in every way, you know, and very dynamic. And he really, you know, he was really the first person I met who really sort of took my head off in terms of you know, keenness and sort of pushing the music forward and really being sort of on, you know, wanting to be ahead of the game.
You once told you time and again, baby, if you don't do right, yeah, I'll find another man. Girl, baby, I just gotta show you, baby. Girl, me, boy, and I just gotta show you, baby. I know you got someone else. I can tell by the way you carry yourself. Right now I'm so disgusted, babe. Seems like no man can be trusted. Girl, baby, I just gotta show you, baby. Girls and me, boy, and I just gotta show you, baby. Girls and me, baby.
Max joined us at the Catacombs, and slowly but surely he was getting more and more his foot in the door, so to speak. And he bought all the records from Alan, and then the one night, just before we were due to depart to go to the Torch, myself and Alan was sacked that same night, and he was told that you've got no records anymore, you're surplus, you know, we don't need you anymore because you've got no records and you're no longer a top DJ. Max has bought all the records, Max takes over. And I remember going to the Torch in the car, feeling really sad about it, and Alan said to me, look, they've told me I'm sacked, but they want you to continue, and they want you to do it with Max. And I refused to do it at the time, and by the time we'd gone to the Torch and spoke about it and come back the next morning, Alan had persuaded me to carry on and to stick with it.
There was a chappie that I have heard mentioned called Froggy, who I believe went off to France. It may be that he covered while Alan was in hospital, but when Alan recovered, he came to see me at my shop and persuaded me to come to the Catacombs, which I went to, I think very, very early in 1971, and I stayed there until its closure in 1974.
I remember the first time I went to the Catacombs along with Ian Levine and the late Les Cackel in Leslie's van, and the big record at the time was Richard Temple, That Beating Rhythm, which we thought, well, it sounds like a cover-up, which was, you know, what they did.
because the Catacombs was actually on Temple Street. So anyway, inside the club, the big record finally came on, and so I had to have a look at it. I didn't know whether it'd be covered up or not, but went over, peered over the decks, and there it was. It was in fact Richard Temple.
Fantastic feeling when you're 16, 17 and you go into this club, you go up a flight of stairs, it's like a big warehouse type effect. And queued up for ages to get in, got our memberships, got in there. I can remember there's a bar on the right hand side, and it was very, very narrow. It was only a few yards wide. I thought, what sort of club is this? And I could only hear music faintly in the distance. So what happened was you went down, that's why it's called the Catacombs, you went down a narrow sort of corridor, and off it were little rooms with there were archways and tables. I can remember it really well.
That's gonna get it for Gary's thing today, baby. A little switch out clothes. Can you dig it? Since Stewart's been the master doing it, like sitting between the tables playing what you're saying, trying to give you what you want, when you want it, where you want it, how you wanted it. I wasn't concerned about why you wanted it. The only thing that blew my mind was to know that you did want it. Knowing the time stands still for no one, I must pretend that I'm a river, and toward a large rivertory. Get on to bigger and better things. In other words, I've got a personal case I've got to get on. 411, 110. You dig it? A whole lot of woman. It takes a whole lot of woman to satisfy my soul.
In terms of discovering and exposing rarities with real style, Blackpool Mecca's Highland Room was at the forefront of the scene after the closure of the Twisted Wheel. This northwestern coastal resort championed many of today's legendary sides.
I was the manager of the Mecca in Blackpool, which incorporated the Highland Room, which was the smaller of the dance halls within the Locarno building, and in those days we didn't really know what to do with it, and hence the commencement of what is now worldwide and known as Northern Soul.
A famous blues and soul journalist by the name of Dave Godin used to write feature articles on different clubs that he'd visited, and from February to about June, word had been getting to him that this place up north in Blackpool, the Highland, was getting bigger and better, and the circle of people coming was getting wider and wider, not only from the northwest but from places like Stoke-on-Trent, Nottingham even, Derby, Burton-on-Trent, and even from London. It sounds ridiculous, but they even came from London for a weekend to this one place, this kind of temple of rare soul music.
I remember the first time that I went to the Highland Room on a Saturday night. I told my parents that I was going to see Ken Dodd and the Diddy Men because I wasn't allowed to stay out past midnight, and I wanted to stay out till 1 o'clock or something. And that was when I first met Ian Levine and Tony Jebb. And when I somehow found a way to introduce myself to them, and they knew my sister and my brother-in-law, and they were really excited because I was just a young kid. And that night, I still remember it like it was yesterday.
You used to go into the Mecca, and you used to go up that escalator, and that escalator was the stairway to heaven, because that was where it all happened. And as you were going through the corridor there, you could hear the music getting louder. As the music was getting louder, your heart was pounding louder.
After you made me baby, the way I am. Now you wanna quit me, baby. Should be ashamed. The sun no longer shines for me since you're gone. But my eyes all upside down since you're gone. What are you trying to do?
Blackpool Mecca was an accessible location from most towns in the northwest because handily coaches went out there on a weekly basis anyway. So it was great, and you could it was almost like your local club because you just got on the bus at Moor Lane in Bolton, and as long as you had a tie, you'd get in the place.
Certain venues captured the real essence of great dance music, none more so than the Golden Torch in Tunstall, Stoke-on-Trent. Former owner Chris Burton.
I was warned several times to stop the all-nighters, but I enjoyed them so much, and the stubbornness in me said no to hell. In the end, local authority found the excuse, they found the reason. Frank Elson, Edwin Starr, several people supported the case against the Torch, and we were fighting a losing battle, but it was not on the drugs issue.
I persuaded Chris Burton to run an all-nighter at the Torch, and he never looked back after that.
First went to the Torch December 1972 with Alan Day. I'd known Alan for around a year. He worked for Selector Disc, and I just found that club just to be unbelievable. It's still my favourite club ever, probably because I wasn't a DJ then, there were no politics then, well, certainly wasn't aware of them. The music was absolutely top-notch. There was a whole new wave of American imports that the Wheel hadn't found at that time.
One of the first artists that we signed was Major Lance, who developed a big following with the Northern Soul fans. And the first single that we released was the Right Track, the old Billy Butler tune. And I'm trying to remember the exact timing on this, or actually how it went down, but I know that Major had done a show at the Torch around the same time, and a bunch of the guys from the office had gone up there, and we got talking with Chris Burton about the idea of doing a live album there. And I think I'm right in saying that it hadn't been done before.
The walls of the Torch behind the stage had actually got silhouettes of soul artists painted on them from a guy from Allsage, actually, just up the road from where I live, called Tony Bembo. And he did silhouettes, Edwin Starr, and I know Edwin Starr is definitely one, but I can't remember who the other ones were. But I think that whoever's actually got those has probably got quite a collectible item.
The Torch was exciting. I should think I was about 20 perhaps by then, and it was my first example of a big club. I'd never been to a club with more than about 150 people dancing to Northern, and it was similar to feelings at Wigan later. Big, hot masses of people, lots of very cool-looking characters, very dubious-looking characters, and great music pounding out all night. Very exciting venue.
When they were pulling the Torch down, my brother went up one night after some souvenirs, and this is the G off the Golden Torch, and he pulled it down off the front.
I soon found when I was there that people like Mick Smith came up from London with records that hadn't been heard before, things like Dottie Cambridge and various other MGM records, and I soon found that if they're going to be broken, I would probably be doing it. Because to me there's two types of DJs. There's the DJs who play the popular known records, and there's the ones that have to break them.
People are talking about the way we getting down. They say that you love me, and the news is all the time. They say that you're the right girl, and you must have been meant for me. Man, I know they're right, 'cause you're out of sight each and every night. With you next to me, it's so heavenly. Honey, can't you see? This love was meant to be. With a talk of the grapevine. They say we look good together when we're out on the stroll.
The real golden era was undoubtedly the 70s, with over 10,000 people every weekend visiting a Northern Soul venue. Active Northern Soul personnel remember those great days one more time.
Ian Levine had decided that there were better records coming out in the States at that time as new releases than the 60s goods that we were playing.
And as he introduced more of those into the playlist, I took more of an interest in them myself. I must confess that I tended to agree. But there was a faction of the crowd that certainly didn't agree with the way Ian was, or the way they thought Ian was taking the musical format at Blackpool.
It was the discerning end of Northern Soul. It was where the people who were the connoisseurs went, right? And they were often the slightly snobbier end of the scene, the ones that kind of liked the fact that records were truly rare, were one-offs, were great. They were the ones that also dressed slightly more, in a slightly more fashionable way. It was less wearing the uniform. Wigan was about wearing the uniform of Northern Soul.
It was very different from anywhere I'd been before. It wasn't so hot and sweaty. It wasn't full of hot and sweaty people. The music was different. You really had a chance to dress up in your best clothes and shine.
The kids were great. I mean, the kids were the best dancers. They could seriously dance. Plus, a lot of them, they really knew about this music. They weren't simply, mindlessly following a certain rhythm. A lot of them would come up to me and they'd talk to me intelligently about this track by the Merwood Strings, or this track by Eddie Hamilton, or whatever. And I was thinking, my, these guys know more about this stuff than I do.
At first, I think it was like the Miami stuff. There's quite a bit of Miami stuff came in. Then there was like New York stuff coming in. But there was influences coming in from a hell of a lot of other places than just Detroit and Chicago.
September 23rd, 1973, the casino on Station Road in Wigan opened its doors and would forever change the course of Northern Soul music. With its huge auditorium, the floor space allowed a wider variety of up-tempo sounds to gain all-nighter and national exposure, attributing to many chart successes.
I got my interest in Northern Soul mainly from going into the Highland Room and then going down to the Torch. Then we heard that the Torch was actually going to be closed, and there was going to be really an area that maybe we could do something, which was at putting an all-nighter on.
So one of the best places I knew in the area, though I'd never worked there, was a place called Wigan Casino.
I just happened to be talking to Russ about the amount of hours that we were doing, because it always amazed me why Wigan Casino was growing in stature. Why was I DJing there? Why on earth did they go and get Keith Minshall, Ian Levine, Colin Curtis, the top DJs of the day? Why his own agenda? And he asked me who I thought might be a good addition. There's a guy in Bolton called Richard Serling.
Wigan Casino itself was a forbidding Victorian dance hall. Housed within it, apart from the main ballroom, were the Joker's restaurant downstairs, the Beachcomber restaurant downstairs, where the warm-up sessions for the all-nighter would take place, and of course the famous Mr. M's ballroom, which wasn't used in the first couple of years of the all-nighter. Stood there as a DJ, you really did feel that you were at the fulcrum of something which was very, very powerful, and you as a DJ could get so much fantastic satisfaction for seeing all those people up on the dance floor to something that you'd been able to select for them.
Kev, I was showing him some records I was selling at the time on the DJ stand. He said, Dave, look, all you have to do is press this button. And I said, well, I've done it in the army, it's all right, I can do this. I said, the only one thing, I haven't got any records. So he shot off to the toilet, and I thought, and he'd locked his record box. And a very poignant moment came about. I put Move On Up, Curtis Mayfield. It was the first thing that came to hand. And I've never forgotten it. From a 3-second pause of, how can you play this, Dave? The whole place erupted. I've never ever forgotten it, and everybody got on the floor.
Wigan was a bigger venue, you know, like a huge aircraft hangar type thing. So you've got a bigger crowd. They were there all night, so again it was a different sort of feel to it. But again, it was the most exciting visual scene. And yet again, I was standing out behind, in this case, Russ Winstanley, Richard Serling, Kev Roberts, watching what they were playing, watching the crowd reaction.
Within 5 minutes of the venue opening, the front of the stage would be lined with the carrier bags that people would bring their changes of clothing in, and by 12:30 there'd be 800 people on the dance floor there enjoying all the sounds that would be played.
She's losing and all over your time of it, but you stick by her side in spite of it, 'cause you're hopelessly in love. Just can't help yourself. Don't be ashamed about it. It can happen to anyone else. Keep your shit up, baby.
Mike Walker was really one of these people who lived 24 hours a day. I try to be able to switch off and can and have two different lives or probably about 5 different facets to my life, but I try to switch off sometimes and have time, quality time with family and friends and things, and probably people away from the business, so you can get away from it. Mike lived it 24 hours a day. Mike was obviously one of the main guys behind Wigan Casino. He was one of the main guys behind Spark Records, RK Records, and then Casino Classics, as I was as well.
First come, first serve. The girl that most deserves. She takes all of the love that I got, whether I'm ready or not. She puts the world of my trust. I'm gonna give her all of my love. It's just a free fall. Come on, gonna take all of my love. Come on, yeah. Free fall. Come on, gonna take all of my love. She don't have to be a beauty queen, just as long as she loves me. Just as long, just as long as she loves me. Just as long as she loves me.
By the mid-70s, DJs and promoters were experimenting with new songs to keep the scene fresh and alive. One of the new generation of venues was the Ritz in Manchester, ironically so close to the Twisted Wheel.
We were kind of the meeting point between the Northern stalwarts and the new wave of New Northern and then jazz funk and New York disco. So we'd have DJs who were playing Northern, and we'd have Colin and Ian playing the new stuff. So we'd have two crowds that converge. Martin Barnfather, aka Soul Sam, actually sent a letter to Echoes saying that myself, Colin Curtis and Ian Levine should be hung because we allowed people in the venue wearing plastic sandals and wearing plastic bin liners. So he didn't like the punk element, which really was what it was all about. It was punk meets disco meets jazz funk meets ex-Northern soul. It was really cool.
The most successful all-dayers during this period were undoubtedly the Manchester Ritz, which had been promoted by Neil Rushton, and we created a mixture of music at the Ritz that became unique. Dancing at the Ritz was of course added to by the fact that the huge dance floor at the Ritz was actually raised in the air above the general area of the club and was actually sprung underneath by huge springs because it was originally built for ballroom dancing.
Ritz in 1975 had developed as a third venue of note in the north of England. You had the Mecca, the Wigan and the Ritz. The Ritz was held usually at least a monthly basis, but sometimes fortnightly, and often a lot of bank holidays. The DJs were DJs from the Wigan camp and also from the Mecca camp. At first there was a sort of, I always remember there being a sort of an unease between the two musical supporters, but there was a tolerance.
After the closure of Wigan Casino, a new venue emerged. The Top of the World on Newport Road in, of all places, Stafford.
I started an all-nighter in Stafford at a place called Top of the World
We started this in late 1980. Out of a desire from a group of people, of other DJs that had been DJing at Yate and at Wigan, people like Gary Rushbrook, Dave Withers, Ian Clark, myself, who felt that all the other all-nighters that were currently happening were the same usual suspects DJing, nothing interesting was happening, and so we wanted to put a venue on for ourselves because we knew that there was an audience there for it.
Stafford was a response generally to the apathy and lack of interest and lack of value that we were getting from any of the all-nighters, which was down in the main to tired DJs who were still interested essentially, but they were tired and they stopped. They didn't have that cut with them anymore. They didn't have that kick. They weren't getting the excitement out of it themselves, which they used to have, but they were still wanting to take the spots.
They put me on at Stafford, and initially they put me on right at the start of the night, and I was playing your Lee McKinney's I'll Keep Holding On, and your Tony Galla's So In Loves, and Empty on the Floor, and that. But gradually they'd work away, and I was very aggressive on the microphone, you know. I would get on the microphone and I'd tell them all, look, if you bloody can't hear how good this record is, then off the northern scene and stop making it all stagnant.
Lonely, 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 lonely for you, baby. Lonely, 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 lonely for you, baby.
Basically, in a nutshell, Stafford opened the doors for a slower tempo of record, so all of a sudden people were considering records that you could barely shuffle to, let alone dance to, and really the scenes never looked back from there on, and I think we're probably suffering from that legacy of mid-tempo and beat ballad records.
The emergence of Northern Soul continued to grow in the South. The 100 Club in London gave capital city-based enthusiasts their own Northern scene.
Being Northern Soul fans as well as Old Soul fans, we went with the all-nighters as an alternative, and that is really when the music got more and more Northern, because an all-night dance is ideal for Northern Soul, whereas an evening dance is more of a general party and piss-up night. An all-nighter has got that Northern buzz about it. You need the dedication and the exuberance to stay up from 1:30 till 8 o'clock.
I always remember the first time you go in the 100 Club, because you go to various all-nighters, Peterborough or wherever was happening at the time, and the music, you would know all of it. You know, like 75% of the music. You go in the 100 Club and it's like, hello, where have I been? You know 10% when you get there the first time, and gradually you learn it. But the records we tend to play down there are rare ones, but good ones. I mean, we don't play rubbish that's rare. I mean, there's someone else to play.
The sweet love in what we never share, and we share the sweetest dreams way beyond compare. Girl, I want you to know I will never set you free. Ooh, baby, that's what you do to me, yeah. That's what you do to me, yeah,
been singing ever since I was around 7. I used to sing in the church. And during my teen years, I played with a band. And I was discovered over at Vanderbilt University by this writer, Matt Gaten. And he introduced Everlasting Love to me. And we cut it, and it hit.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing how they know every song, for example, that I've ever written. Songs that I've forgotten I've written myself. I had a guy come to me at one of the all-nighters I was playing I was in England, and he brought a record to me. It's one of the funny story. He says, "Philip Mitchell signed this record for me," and I said, I looked at it, I took the record, and I looked, this is not me. He said, "Sign it for what?" I said, "This is not mine." He said, "Oh yes, it's you, believe me, it's you." I said, "No, this is not me, this is Don Covey." He said, "But yes, Philip, but it's you singing along with him. I know your voice anywhere." And I thought, "Man, you're crazy. Get out of here," you know. And he said, "I promise you, here, I'll give you a copy. You take this, if you sign it for me, you take this, and if it's not you, then write me and send it back, but just take it and see." And I honestly took the record and I went home and I played it, and it was me.
I trust when they hear this music, it'll bring back fond memories. I also hope that they will reinvent music to the youth of today so that we can stop the harmonic illiteracy that's going on and seems to be fairly prevalent in the world today. We're working on a 3rd generation of harmonically illiterate children, and I think it's a shame. I know a multitude of musicians who put their heart and soul into their craft, and it would seem that everything that's old becomes new again. So if that is the case, then real music has a good future. I thank you for the opportunity that you've given me to sing.
I remember coming over to Great Yarmouth. You say it was 1990? My, how time flies. But yes, I was an artist at one of the Weekenders. And it was quite nice. The crowd was receptive and they seemed to like the music, and most of all, they were familiar with it. So that shocked me coming across, you know, the Atlantic and finding that my music, that people knew about it.
Something that you've done 25 years ago and never even thought any more of, and to see the people in England here and the north side, how they just got a hold of it and just made it something, and then to call us and have us come over here is just a phenomenal thing. And I really, really, truly appreciate it. I really do.
I first became aware of the Northern Soul scene in 1982. Chris King called us all over, myself, Al Kent, Lou Ragland, J.J. Barnes. We all came over to Nottingham, and I was just amazed, fascinated to find out, hey, I'm a star over here, you know? Here in the home of Robin Hood, Nottingham. I was just, I had been over before, but nothing like this. You know, in my own right, here I am, Pat Lewis, you know? It was just so exciting, and the people, they made you feel like, they were like, salami, salami, bologna, you know, just bowing at your feet. You know, and once I left and went back home, I turned back into just plain old Pat Lewis, you know, Pat Lewis the person and not the star. You know, it's just wonderful.
Competition ain't nothing. I was like 14. You know, they was labeling me like Stevie Wonder. They say 12-year wonder, Carl Carlton, 12-year wonder. And, you know, basically what really the situation was that Motown at that time was so dominant that, you know, any artist locally really didn't really have a chance because they controlled the market, you know, because every artist from the Temptations, Stevie, Smokey, Jackson, you can go on and on, Gladys Knight, you know, Contour, Marvelous, Martha Reeves, they controlled that era. And you know, for anybody that was trying to get out there and get recognition and you had talent, it was hard because, you know, it was like, you know, you get blackballed or black market, or, you know, I mean, the radio stations would just play all Motown records, and, you know, anybody trying to get in there, man, you know, they would like squash you, you know, it was very difficult.
I used to worry about another fella trying to steal my girl away. I used to talk to turn all through the night. The thought of it kept me awake. Every time she walked by him, she was all in his eyes. She said it's straight, she told him, had to be your only guy. Competition ain't nothing, y'all. If you gotta love this too, you better believe it. Competition ain't nothing, y'all. They just keep on loving you. Oh, yeah. Hey, hey, baby. Oh, crying aloud makes swollen eyes caused by jealousy.
With so little radio play, how on earth does an obscure and insular scene survive? Passion, enthusiasm, commitment, and of course, the magazines.
Blues and Soul started in 1966. It was called Home of the Blues, and John Addy ran up a little 12-page black and white magazine in his... Years later, it's still here, and a lot of Northern Soul people during that period regarded the magazine as their Bible.
I first became aware of Northern Soul, I guess, in the late 60s, by which time Blues and Soul, which started out as Home of the Blues, had become Blues and Soul, and people such as Dave Godin, David Nathan had joined the magazine, and they kind of helped develop the interest in Northern Soul as far as the journalistic side was concerned anyway.
The producers of these wonderful treasures are often as surprised as the artists.
I decided to take Lee Andrews up a different avenue. Motown was hot, people were dancing and so forth and so on, and I didn't see myself taking him in and singing a slow ballad that would only come out in the winter. And I needed a record for the summer. So I just, and one day, just talking to Lee, I just said, hush now, don't you cry. Hey, feeling like the vamp in your eye. I've had it, boom, you got it, boom. The whole world is talking about it, boom. And he just jumped on it, and Tommy Bell, who was then working with us, also, we came down and we put that together.
The guy that was in charge of the A&R department at Columbia Records flew me into New York to have a meeting with me, and we sat down and discussed the possibility of him hiring me for A&R department. And he spoke about activating or reactivating a label that they once called the Blues label, which was that OK label. So he reactivated that label specifically for me. And that's how I came about starting the OK product.
Double Cooking, Checkerboard Square. That's a great record. That's an instrumental that Mark and I went into the studio in Los Angeles actually and did. And we were just having fun. We wanted to create happy music, dance, disco music that had the sound that was driving as an instrumental. Had no idea it was going to make its way over here and do as well as it's done. That is tremendous.
I'm glad to talk to everybody out in the Northern Soul scene again. And it's been a very great experience doing all the records that I've written for all the various artists such as Jimmy Soul Clark, Sweet Darling, Cool Off with the Detroit Executives, Yes, I Love You Baby by the Dynamics, Sister Lee by Singing Sammy Ward, and of course my partner Mr. Tony Hester when he did Down in the Dumps. Everything was so great since 1984 up until now. I enjoyed all the audiences and all the fans. It's been a great experience, a very great experience, and enjoyable coming to the UK.
I started basically in the 60s, in the late 60s, mid to late 60s, as a guitar player, songwriter, stuff like that. And some of my earlier productions actually wound up later on as being part of what is now known as Northern Soul.
and one of them was by a guy, by the name of James Bounty, called "Prove Yourself a Lady."
A song called "It's Going to Be a Big Thing" became a big hit, and it was underlined as Northern Soul, which was the first time that I heard that expression. And then other records of ours that I had written and worked with some of the acts here from the States. There was a group from Allentown, Pennsylvania. This particular artist, called Father's Angels, they pulled up in front of our offices in one of these very large orange school buses driven by Father Angelo and his shepherding of these 9 very talented blue-eyed soul fellas, and I called them Father's Angels. That's how they got the name.
Girl, you know you can't light my fire with that same old burning desire. It's like a fire telling me my teenage heart. It's like a fire burning me my teenage heart. Girl, your lips sure look sweet, and when you close your body heat brings back lessons I once learned. I'll play with fire and I'll sure get burned. It's like a fire telling me my teenage heart. It's like a fire burning me my teenage heart. It seems only yesterday you left me stranded in the cold, and now that I'm back to play, I can't let that fire get out of control. A fire warning me my teenage heart. Your sweet words are so heartfelt, my resistance starts to melt. Girl, you know you can't light my flame, that old burning in my brain. It's like a fire telling me my teenage heart. It's like a fire burning me my teenage heart. It seems only yesterday you left me stranded in the cold, and now that I'm back to play, I can't let that fire get out of control. Girl, you know you can't light my fire with that same old burning desire. Like a fire burning me my teenage heart. It's like a fire burning me my teenage heart. It's like a fire telling me my teenage heart.
The revival during the last decade is a mixture of 70s teens now becoming adults and the accessibility of the music via compact discs.
Although we started with the Kent Modern label, the sales were so good and the demand was so good that we went on to release from Brunswick, records, Scepter One Records, and eventually got over to the majors like MCA, who had Duke, Peacock, ABC, Decca, Coral, and we eventually put out 97 LPs on vinyl before vinyl died, from all sorts of sources. And shortly after vinyl died, we started on the CDs, and I guess we've got about 80 CDs in catalogue at the moment.
I started Ace Records back in the 70s with Trevor Churchill and Roger Armstrong, and we started putting out old blues and rock and roll stuff. And we picked up the Kent Modern catalogue, and A.D. Crowsdale, who's a friend of ours, approached us and said, what are you going to do with, the northern stuff in there? And we said, well, do you want to put something together?
I went to the Mecca for years.
And I went with my mate, this lad called Rob Stainsby, and Eileen went with her mate called Jean.
Yeah.
And we actually met up and made two couples, and we both married.
We all married, yeah.
So it was quite a...
It was quite an amazing
fact. It was quite
fact.
a social thing for us, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Northern Soul certainly changed our lives. We met in the Mecca, and we've been married now for 22 years.
Northern Soul has changed our lives because I met my wife Lynn on the Northern Soul scene. I was 18, she was 16, and we're still together, 25 years on. We just had our silver wedding last year in August, and here we are.
Northern Soul actually changed my life, or affected the whole of my life. I met Tim at the Mecca, and we married a few years later and have now been together 23 years. As a result of the Mecca, and meeting each other there, we've had two wonderful children who are now grown up, and I often wonder if it hadn't have been for meeting him there, what would have happened in my life.
Northern Soul was never known for fashion styling, although the baggies, holdalls and flared skirts went some way to creating history.
I would say on the whole, going to the Highland Room every week, I had something new every single week. Even if I was only sewing half of an outfit, I probably had something. I always did have something new every week. I would never go in the same thing. I often sold my clothes to my friends so I could go out and buy more material to make something new for the following week. I had to wear something new every week.
Getting ready for the Mecca on a Saturday night was always a big event for the girls, such as Joanne Leach and Janet Thompson and I. We used to go round to either each other's houses at lunchtime on a Saturday to start thinking about what we were going to wear. As we began to get jobs and earn our own wages, almost the whole of our wage packets would go on the compulsory new outfit for the Saturday night.
The Twisted Wheel downstairs, you've got to remember the Twisted Wheel was concrete floors, no sprung dance floors and whatever else you get nowadays. It was concrete floors with brick walls painted black or red or whatever. And by 5 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, they're streaming with sweat, right? Now, if you're leaping around and you're dancing on the floor and you're doing backflips, you're landing on your hands, gloves are quite a useful thing.
It attracted people who were style leaders, but there was no style Bibles at the time, so it was created by people by themselves. They weren't told what to wear. People created it themselves, haircuts, clothing, shoes, everything.
Collecting Northern Soul records has become a lifelong challenge for many. With prices at an all-time high, the popularity and saleability is as buoyant as ever.
In my day, £100 was considered a lot of money for a record, but I've since learnt that a Scottish guy has paid £15,000 for a Motown classic, Frank Wilson's Do I Love You. Hard to believe, but there you have it.
Although people may find this hard to believe, having collected records since I was 11 years old in 1964, I found myself in a position where to achieve my lifelong ambition of owning Frank Wilson, I had to pay the unearthly sum of £15,000 to acquire it. And you may think for a Scotsman being tight, that's a wee bit off-putting, but that's the way it was, I'm afraid.
Here I am on bended knees, I lay my heart down at your feet now. All you have to do is ask, I'll give
I've probably got the largest Northern Soul collection in the world, inspired initially in the early and mid-70s by collectors like Ian Levine and Bob Stevens, people who wanted to own the lot. And I used to look at the DJs with maybe a box or two of very rare records, and I didn't want to do it that way. I wanted the lot as well, and it took many years to do it, but I always wanted to find the pearls from amongst whole rows of records, and to be able to compare with other soul styles and better or worse records, and to have a true archive, a true record of this music, because quite frankly I didn't see anybody else doing it at all.
For years I understand DJs have been covering up records, and I heard from Ian Levine that I was apparently the first guy as a DJ to cover up records. Initially I was ashamed. I thought, well, you're cheating. You may be cheating copyright, I don't know. But we had a record, it was Bobby Patterson, What a Wonderful Night for Love. And I changed the label, and I even put it on list to sell as a guy, Benny Harper, because I had another record by him. I think it was on Philae, so can't remember the tune. Don't Let It Happen to You, I think it was called. And people were saying, have you got Benny Harper? I said, yeah. And it took so many years before someone said, hang on, that's on Palmer, and you can still buy it. I said, well, I'm sorry.
We were one of the first people to start importing the rare Northern Soul records into the country. We sent away for catalogues to the States, got in touch with a guy called Bernie Binnick in Philadelphia, and he sent us the catalogues, and then we placed our orders with him. In fact, it was quite a catalogue of disaster, because the first order we sent for, we went to the bank said they would send the bank draft to Philadelphia. About 6 months later, the bank draft was still sitting in the bank records, and we had no records.
In the 70s, if you had a record and you paid £30 for it, which was a lot of money, because us lads was only on £6 a week, and you'd go out and somebody had got a pressing of this record. So instantly, you would sell the original for £2.50 or £3.
The collector's market in all music has gone and skyrocketed, but one of the first lucrative markets in collector records was soul records. They were one of the first types of music that were worth, a value as such to a collector's market.
I do remember one fateful occasion. I'd got a record by George Blackwell on Smoke called Can't Lose My Head. Curtis looked through the box, went straight past it. Levine looked at it. What's this like, Chris? Oh, it's quite nice, you know. Let me borrow it. And he played it. What do you want for it, Chris? And I think I said something really extortionate, like £3, you know, because it was unknown, and you know, if it wasn't a sound. And lo and behold, you know, the £3 changed hands, and I bought myself a couple of drinks and a pie, and that was gone. And the record subsequently, Levine took it to the top, and it became, and it still is, you know, one of the all-time great Northern sides.
Other man in front of all my friends, you called me a clown and said, now this is the end. But nevertheless, I keep loving you, baby. I don't care what anybody says. Nevertheless, I keep loving you, baby. I don't care what anybody says. Nevertheless, I keep loving you, baby. Nevertheless, I keep loving you, baby. My heart's raging and wrapped in pain. People tell me I'm going insane. Tell me, baby, this is the truth. They never know what we can do. But nevertheless, I keep loving you, baby. I don't care what anybody says. Nevertheless, I keep loving you, baby. I don't care what anybody says. One more chance. Help me, baby, to save our romance. If you do, I'll be so glad. If you don't, honey, I won't be mad. But nevertheless, I keep loving you, baby. I don't care what anybody says. Nevertheless, I keep loving you, baby. I don't care what anybody says. Keep loving you, child. I don't care what anybody says. Gonna give another chance. I swear I don't care what anybody says. Don't care, I don't care what anybody says.
I recently found a record that was absolutely unknown to everybody, which is which was the first record on a Motown sub-label called VIP, and the number is 25,001, you know, and it's by Patrice Holloway, you know, and nobody ever heard about that record ever, you know, and I worked for Motown myself, you know, for many years, and I've looked in the files, you know, and I've never heard of it.
Collecting records, Northern records in the 90s is problematic, I would say, from a number of points of view. First of all, comparing to collecting in the 70s, I would say other collectors are a lot more knowledgeable. And where that impacts most really is in the realm of lesser known records. Whereas people are on the lookout for those things, they're a lot more knowledgeable. So that impacts on the collecting scene as a whole. That makes it difficult for everybody, because in a sense everybody's hunting the same kind of stuff.
Journalists tried in vain to report events within this incredible scene. Former blues and soul contributor Frank Elson.
I came from a working class background in the north of England. I just went out and enjoyed my soul music. Someone once said, when we were sort of in a conversation to Dave, that David never used one word where four would do, and I replied, that's true, and I'll never use one where half will do.
I wrote an article about one particular star, and it could have been one of 1,000. A chap called Eddie Foster came out of San Francisco, made one or two great records, and then disappeared back into obscurity again. Some of the clubs and the DJ Ian Levine got hold of this record, which is very hard to buy, in fact probably very rare in its day, began to play it, and before long it was a big record in the Northern Soul scene.
Like all new music genres amongst teenagers comes designer drugs. All-nighter followers explain.
Along with the music and the dancing and the friendships and the whole part of the scene, in order to stay awake and to dance all night, drugs, speed, amphetamines were prevalent on the scene. It became normal to be there and to score.
We used to take the dexedrine, the Drinamol to keep us going all night. And of course, me being me, I sort of went the whole way.
I can remember some of our friends, and everyone was breaking into chemists at that time, and a couple of friends of ours from Accrington broke into a chemist and they fell through the roof, and things like this were happening every weekend virtually, and our friends would disappear and, you know, they'd emerge 6 or 7 months later.
When we broke up, I did sad. I made pretend that you had hurt me bad, yet in my heart I grinned. I held up my chin because I knew
Someday, yeah, we're gonna love again. Just Say You Want It and Need It. Now that song. Now I gotta tell you, when I recorded that, I had to have been 15 years old. 15, I'm sure it was 15.
You know, that was the OK label at first. That was a subsidiary of Columbia. And then when Carl moved to Brunswick Records, then we went to Brunswick, you know, which is, you know, out of New York.
Northern Soul, irregardless of what people may think or what some people may claim, was far more than Motown. Far more than Motown. In fact, I don't really believe that a lot of the Northern Soul songs really were connected to Motown.
We have been a very popular group in the European market, period. Unfortunately, the booking agencies that we've been involved with, and they're all a bunch of, were the reasons why we have never performed for the population, the general population in Europe.
Inky Dinky Wang Dang Do. What a title. And then the answer was, Baby, Baby, I Love You. And that's what everybody wanted to understand. What was the dialogue? What was the conversation?
I recorded Picture Me Gone in 1967, and I never thought that I'd be sitting here now, some 30 years later, with the whole Northern Soul, this wonderful musical movement that's happened in the UK.
Anybody who's gone through that Northern Soul era will tell you that they'll all probably say there'll never ever be anything like that ever again.
Popcorn says, Yvonne, I have a song for you that I think will fit you. And the name of the song is Just Like You Did Me. So I heard it, I liked it, we recorded it, and it was released in the States, in Detroit.
That was just completely stunned and just bowled over at the way they felt about the music, you know, we certainly, so many of them flopped so fast in America. We didn't even think about them anymore. Many of the tunes, when I did the first Northern Soul thing, I had to learn the lyrics for.
I'm very pleased that my songs have always been a part of the Northern Soul scene. I've heard a lot about the Northern Soul scene. And hopefully with God's blessings, I'll be a part of it sooner than later.
I want to thank the people of the northern part of England, which is called the Northern Soul, for appreciating our music, because we feel as though we were forgotten. Today is the day, 1999, they're still thinking about us.
Girl, you promised me that one day you'll be the love I can call on mine. But every time I ask, are you ready for love? You tell me to hold on a little bit longer, but please don't make me wait too long, 'cause without you I can't go on. You are the one for me, and I love you so desperately.
Publications now chart the history of the scene, such as the new book, The Northern Soul Top 500.
There are a small number of books that have been written about the Northern Soul scene. There was Night Shift, Pete McKenna, that's a recent one, rather about the life of a normal Northern Soul boy. And of course there was the Rustling Stanley and Dave Knoll Casino book, which I thought rather captured the essence of going to the all-nighter, but quite frankly I thought musically and factually was extremely flawed.
We having a drink in a wine bar, and we came up with the idea of writing a book about Northern Soul because no one had done it. The only book that had come out recently at the time was Russell and Stanley's book about Wigan Casino, and which covered that particular part of the Northern Soul scene, but it sort of avoided everything like, you know, going back to the early days of the Wheel, Catcoons, Varvars, and it only touched really on Mecca.
We often wonder how all these great 45s and albums landed on the shores of the UK. The cream of British dealers explain.
You need to know, label, artist, title, B-side, A-side, value, original from bootleg, and that's over, I would say, records that fall into a Northern Soul category, there must be 150,000 minimum. That fall into that category, a collectible category.
It's well known that Northern Soul records have completely skyrocketed. They've reached an absolute zenith. In many ways, these vinyl antiques have eventually found their place in the sun. No doubt about that. The highest price, of course, is fairly well known now, is Frank Wilson, Do I Love You? After that, the highest price known to me, for certain, is £4,000 for the Inspirations, No One Else Can Take Your Place.
Our best sellers in the times of imports, well, we had thousands of Dobie Grey before we brought it out. We must have sold 10 or 11,000 Dobie Grey out on the floor, legitimate import. Barbara Mills' Queen of Fools sold every month, you know, that must have sold 10,000.
Look at this, the Temp Tones on Arctic, a promo. This is a big record in England, this is Northern. Girl I Love You, promo. So you never know what you're going to find here. I'm telling you, stuff everywhere. The Jays, Jimmy and the Persianettes. This is even a Weldon record. Look, this is Weldon did this. Why did I show him this? Tiffany's on MBS, MRS. This was sold to Atlantic. Who knows? There's mixed boxes of stuff. This I'm going to keep out.
When we moved to Kings Lynn, Ian Levine was probably the first of the well-known DJs to come down, and he was looking for a record by the Carstairs that only came out on a promo, and we happened to have bought a big, maybe 50 or 100,000 promo records from the 60s and the 70s, and it was in there, and he found it, and I think there was 3 copies, and then it became a massive record, and it's still a massive record today.
I did used to get bootlegs from various people, and the shops in Manchester hadn't got a direct supply of these, so I'd actually buy Chris Burton's Out of the Past pressings from somebody, meet them on the M62, and get those. And on Saturday I'd actually go into spinning in Manchester and HMV shops and all over the place, swap my bootleg Northern Soul thing for any new releases that sounded good, particularly in the sort of early 70s when the Mecca was playing brand new records.
As early as 71 and 72, it was on our minds to discover, you know, and find as many unknown records as we could to get them played. We met Tony Jebb. We found a record in Hemel Hempstead by George Carra, Angel Baby, and we took it up to him, and he bought it off us. And then we met Ian Levine and sold him various bits and pieces.
You
The friendliness of the scene is well documented. However, there were feuds.
There's an intense rivalry developing between Ian, especially Ian, not so much Colin, but especially Ian and Russ Winstanley at Wigan, who seemed to be terrified really of the direction that the scene was taking. And I think, again, like by early 75, I felt it was all over. The Mecca was the Mecca, Wigan was Wigan, and that was it, and the two didn't mix.
You had that rivalry. Each venue was trying to play the best sounds available, and they did in their own way. Some people might say that the Casino went a little bit popish, some people might say the Mecca went a little bit funky, but in their own right and together they made a great scene. For the actual person who was there, the dancer, the customer, for the DJs, okay, there was probably a lot of rivalry. However, for us, it was fantastic.
A long time ago, you were the only girl I wanted to know. You didn't accept me right away, but face the facts, I'm here to stay. So don't pretend I'll disappear, 'cause I'm bringing you a love that's so sincere. I got your best interests at heart. There's no sense in us being apart. Look back over your shoulder, and I'll be there, I'll always care. Look back over your shoulder, anywhere we can share. I know you think I'm just a flirt, but you're so wrong and I'm easily hurt. My ambition, all to know you, sharing it all, I hold on through. Won't you take me seriously? Open up your eyes and try to see. No other guy could love you more than you've ever been loved before. Look back over your shoulder, and I'll be there, I'll always care. Look back over your shoulder, anywhere we can share. I don't wanna play second fiddle, don't let my feelings be torn into.
Television often found itself as an intrusion into the hardcore followers' itinerary. What did the movers and shakers think of the long lens and clapperboard?
I think the media, certainly the kind of popular media's presence in Wigan was a tremendous kind of downside to the whole scene. In fact, I mean, there were quite a lot of protests against it at the time. You know, when the cameras were being let into Wigan, did we want them, didn't we? And it was always unanimous vote to keep them out. And there was a belief that there was an underground media of the soul press and fanzines and whatever, and that was enough. As soon as it became the Daily Mirror or the Sun or whatever, that was not what people wanted.
To date, Northern Soul's coverage through the media, particularly on TV, in my opinion, has always been made by people that have no connection whatsoever with Northern Soul. It is purely a TV producer's interpretation of what he perceives to be Northern Soul, i.e. baggy trousers, cap sleeve t-shirts, Wigan Casino, and youths off their heads spinning around with talcum powder on the floor.
Northern Soul has had something of a raw deal from TV. They never get it just right. There are always major deficiencies. That apart, the various programmes can't be lumped together and categorised all as one. This England now seems so long ago, everyone seems so young on it. The somewhat hackneyed interspersions with scenes of sparking clogs down Wigan streets was frightfully embarrassing at the time.
Northern Soul, in a lot of areas, had a major influence on newly recorded songs. Producer Pete Waterman, responsible for many hits during the past 25 years, explains.
People underestimate the importance of Northern Soul in 90s pop music because particularly, say, let's be honest, north of, say, Birmingham, a lot of the last 20 years record producers have come from a cultural background that has been inundated with Northern Soul music, and whether it played a important part knowingly or subliminally we'll never know, but certainly people like myself and Mike Pickering and other people were inundated with Northern Soulers in our informative years.
Northern Soul, I wouldn't say has had a great influence on modern dance music, but there have been some very clever producers, such as Fatboy Slim, who may be aware of certain elements of Northern Soul and has used it to very good effect on a couple of things. I heard a record recently that's just sampled the beginning bars of Dobie Gray's Out on the Floor. So yes, it's still there and it still has an influence.
I was probably the first A&R man in London to take any serious notice of the Northern Soul scene. This would be back in '73. It was records like Robert Knight's Love on a Mountaintop. When that started to happen, you know, I checked into why was suddenly this old record happening, and found that it's the Northern Soul scene. And the Northern Soul scene again had been responsible, or partly responsible, for records like The Tams happening again, and various old Motown singles charting, 6 years after they'd been dead and buried.
Judy Street came out when we issued that, and that went into the top 100, but it was pulled out that week because the powers that be thought we'd hyped the record because there was no sales in London. All the sales were in the north of England. There was no sales in the south, so they reckoned it must have been a fix. So they pulled the record out the chart, and that first week it came out, I think on the Thursday. By the Friday it sold 10,000.
Certainly people like myself who were involved in mutating some of the older songs into what was then current music bands like Wigan's Ovation, and Dave with his No Smoking, or No Smoking and the Javels as they became. That was a period when it was, in reality, I think, although we would bring it to the masses, so I think we did a service. In reality, we were the first nail in the coffin of a scene that was natural.
Our biggest hit on Black Magic was the Showenettes, Popperoo Mau Mau, which actually made number 26 in the charts and was actually used as a fade-out record on Top of the Pops, but Pans people wouldn't dance to it. They said the beat was strange.
Start to pull my soul apart. And ooh, honey,
At certain junctions in its 33-year history, Northern Soul has been inspirational, none more so than DJ producer Ian Levine recording many Motown artists in an attempt to keep vintage soul well and truly alive.
Motown held a family reunion which brought together many of its unsung heroes. Motown alumni such as Kim Western, Marv Johnson, the Velvelettes, and Ivy Jo Hunter were brought together to record again by British record producer Ian Levine.
It's kind of strange it took an English person to do it, because I'm amazed that with all these fabulous artists around, nobody has ever thought of doing it before. And it's tragic that groups like the Marvelettes and the Velvelettes should be working day jobs and things when we want to put them back out there and give them the acclaim that they deserve.
Coming together again brought back these special memories.
Martha and the Vandellas was the first one I went on the road with. You see, we had this finishing school where everybody went to school a couple hours a day if they were in town, or if not, we went out on the road with them. And then the next, and I thought that was exciting.
I remember waiting until all of the sessions were over and bringing Stevie in this room and spending hours with him, playing every instrument in here, going from the drums to the piano, from the piano to the xylophone or jawbones or anything else in here that could be played. And I remember him making all kinds of music and doing all kinds of wonderful things right here, creating right here in the studio.
I'm running to you. To your waist.
Inside my lonely room, I'm out of sight, but I'm filled with gloom. And out of sight, the world goes by, but I'll just hang my head and cry, baby. Come see, come see, come see what's left of me. Left of me, left of me. No, come on and see what's left of me, baby. Left of me, baby. Once you feel my world will grow, but now I find it was all just a joke. But it's much too late to wonder why, 'cause without your love I'll die. I know, baby. Come see, come see, come see what's left of me. So, come see, come see, come see what's left of me, baby. Left of me, baby. Left of me, left of me. Why don't you come see? Come see, come see. So left of me, baby. Left of me, baby. Come see. What's left of me, baby? Come see. What's left of me, honey? Come see, man, come see the big man cry. What's left of me, baby? Come see. Still left of me, honey. Come see the man. Come see the big man cry.
I think the state of the current Northern Soul scene in 1999 is as healthy as it has been for a long time. But what that's down to, I don't really know. Whether it's Joe and Jane Bloggs having kids that are old enough to be left on their own, and that age group coming back out again, I think it's more the case than most. The new sort of compilation CDs that are coming out may be responsible for it.
For the last 35 years or so, Motown fanatics, Northern Soul fanatics, have been aware of the vast amount of material that was recorded in Detroit, in Los Angeles, in New York. For me, probably the greatest thing that's ever happened in terms of soul music is being the person that was allowed to go into those vaults, to listen to those tracks.
I think if the more that we can incorporate 70s and 80s soul, then we've got a chance of, you know, enticing some of the younger people in. If you started playing 60s stuff, then you're never going to get it.
I think the golden age of Northern Soul should be now, because we've never had the variety of records to choose from that we have.
25 years on, 12,000 miles away in Australia, and the memories are just so intense and so special that it seems only yesterday.
Some say Northern Soul is a matter of life or death. I can reveal it's far more important than that.
I know you come to tell me that it's over. Oh yeah, well alright, I'll let you go free. But baby, though it may be over for you, it'll never be over for me. Made up my mind not to start crying, oh no. But there is more than the eye can see. 'Cause baby, inside my heart is breaking apart. 'Cause it'll never be over for me. I know every time I look up at the stars, your face is gonna come into view. And every time the wild wind touches my lips, ooh, I think of your kiss and feel so new. But if ever you find that you were mistaken, oh yeah, no matter how long that my heart breaks, oh, just come on back, I'll forget about everything, yeah. 'Cause it may be over for you, yeah.